Greetings and welcome to the second part of my look at Retro Game Crunch, a compilation of 7 different games, each made with a theme selected by the game's Kickstarter backers. If you'd like to see the first part, feel free to click here, I'll give you a moment. And okay, let's move on to the next game. Gaia Attack. The theme, you are the level. Or is it Gaia Attack? Not sure. It's a vertical beat-em-up game where you ascend to reach the top while taking on a variety of different enemies through combo hits, kicks, and punches. This is a pretty solid game. At first I felt it was a bit too repetitive for my taste, but it's one that's really grown on me the more I've played it. It has a good difficulty curve as the different levels have more and more challenging enemies to face, like those with guns, cannons, spikes so you can't hop on them, and other baddies to fall to your skill. I think a few issues I have were some of the jumping controls. It's made it so you can do an uppercut to give you a little extra height to reach some of the higher platforms, but the controls aren't quite as responsive. I kept wanting to do an uppercut but ended up doing a regular punch and falling to my doom. It's not a good sign when you have to adjust your reflexes to the game's controls. One of the interesting aspects is how arcadey it is by design. Every time you lose a life, it keeps track of your high score, and when you start over, the score is reset to 0. There are unlimited lives, and the only real penalty for dying is being sent back to the checkpoint with your score reset. It would have been a nice little feature to incorporate some kind of live system, maybe getting combo hits to get a 1-up. The fighting and punching can be very satisfying, especially when ranking up combo hits on different enemies, and how the different enemies have different weak points helps mix it up. At the end of each stage is a boss battle with the same enemy. He gets more and more challenging as the captain learns your moves between different levels. The game is fairly short to beat your first time through, roughly about an hour, and it does have the mind for multiple playthroughs for high scores. I should also mention that the game has a co-op mode, and I must confess I haven't had a chance to play this with friends. I feel like the game was more made for this mode and would probably be a lot more fun with friends, but I did have a pretty solid time playing the solo mode. Gaia Attack isn't the strongest game in the compilation, but it's a fairly solid beat-em-up. Up next, the fourth game, Paradox Lost. The theme, can't stop time traveling. This is one that sounds really awesome on paper. It's a Metroid-style game with the mechanic that you can travel between different periods in time. The past, the present, and the future, and each era has different maps to them. You have to explore the world using different weapons and abilities in order to bring people back to their respective time periods using your handy rifle. Like Metroid, new abilities unlock new areas in the game, and you explore, finding new abilities, more people, etc, we've all been here before. This is one of the games I had the most mixed reactions to of the collection. One issue I had was the game's tutorials. It does a good job of explaining the controls as you go along, but there's one small detail they forgot to mention. This being a world-changing Metroidvania, a map is a bit more important than ever to get your bearings and to figure out what you're supposed to do next. At first I thought that the game's map had no way to be able to switch between time periods so you could see what you haven't explored yet. But looking in the game's readme, there is a button to be able to toggle between the different time periods within the map. It's the S key when you're on the map screen, in case you're wondering. Or the any key, that works too. The world can be a bit confusing to navigate, and without knowing this tool, I spent a lot of time than I care to admit traipsing around trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. It's good that the game does have this feature, but the tutorials could have been a little bit more consistent. Trying to travel between different time periods can be obnoxious as well. In order to do so, you have to aim your gun so it hits the different crystals and then it ricochets its way, warping you to the next time period. The problem is that if your sprite is on a part of the platform in the area you're trying to warp to, then you won't be able to warp. So from this you'll be spending a lot of time second guessing where the heck you're supposed to stand in order to get to the next area. It's about as much fun as it sounds. The game also has this strange feature where if you find yourself stuck, you can end your life and be teleported to the last save point. I'm guessing while playtesting they realized there were some parts of the game where players might get stuck and wanted to have a failsafe. Unfortunately, what this does is that when the button is pressed accidentally, any progress that you made is completely gone. The default configuration for this button is right next to the map button on the 360 controller. So when bringing up your map, which is incredibly useful for this kind of game, chances are you'll hit the reset button by mistake. That was infuriating for the wrong reasons. The game does have nice variety with its power-ups and throws in some clever puzzles here and there for you to solve. While the character sprites and objects are very nicely detailed and animated, the game's backgrounds just remain one static image when you scroll left or right or up or down. I do feel this is a game that once you get through the little quirks that you can find yourself enjoying. It's got a good tone about it with a good soundtrack, it's satisfying to find the power-ups and to be able to solve the puzzles, and it's got a pretty interesting story to it as well. It's also one of the longer games in Crunch, being about 3 hours to beat it. It's a very ambitious game for the team to pull off within the constraints, and I felt it needed a bit more time to polish. It's definitely not my favorite of the bunch, but Paradox Lost is a pretty solid game. How about something with a more ridiculous amount of cute to it? Wub-Wub Wetro. The theme, music, influences the level. You play as this adorable little pug here, trying to save his or her master from tribesmen by platforming over to them. Apparently these tribesmen head for the hills the second a cute little puppy gets anywhere close to them. Going with the theme, the game is a platformer centered around music. The tribesmen play a beat at times when certain platforms will be climbable. Your little mutt dog jumps to the beat of the music. In order to get through some of the baddies, like the snakes and monkeys, you'll have to go to music boxes where your little pug memorizes the melody and can bark that melody to do a variety of different things. The snakes go to sleep, the bats carry you, and it triggers monkeys to chuck you across the screen. It's a very challenging game as you have a very limited distance to where you can drop to the ground, and you have to make very precise jumps to dodge enemies and arrows. The momentum of your jump is locked where you can't control how high you jump and you can't shimmy your aim for your landing left and right. Wub-Wub Wetro, which is a really fun name to say, is one of the more challenging games in the compilation, but it's also one of the most rewarding and fair games. It was designed with the strict controls in mind and leaves the all-important feeling of satisfaction as the game requires your patience getting through it. The music mechanic is used really well in the game and gives it a unique edge, and the presentation and tone of the whole game is a lot of fun, from the intentional misspelling of the name to the fact that your cute puppy has his or her tongue hanging out throughout the whole experience. Being about an hour and a half to get through it, it's a well-focused and light-hearted little adventure that offers a nice challenge and a worthwhile experience. Definitely another highlight of Crunch. That concludes the second part of my look at Retro Game Crunch. The final part will be released this week. Just like the last, I'll update the links to the new video as soon as it's released. Thanks for watching.